Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you very much for viewing our video today, which is introducing the conditions of change for the work that you're going to be or are already involved in across the areas of Havant, Portsmouth, and Southampton. Just to introduce myself, my name's Kev Harris. I head up FH Associates. I also work very closely with Louis alongside me on the National Valuation and Learning Partnership, which is commissioned by Sport England to help places evaluate their impact and understand the impact that they're having around tackling physical inactivity within place-based approaches. Louis, did you want to just introduce yourself quickly?
Hi everyone, I'm Louis Ryan. So I work with Kev at FH Associates, and I also work as part of the National Valuation and Learning Partnership team with Kev and working closely with Sport England.
Thanks, Louis. And one of the things that myself and Louis have been asked to do by Energize Me uh, is work with the places of Southampton, Portsmouth, and Havant to uh, bring to life and surface um, understanding around the what we call the system maturity matrix, or in more plain speaking terms, the conditions of change that are potentially necessary to tackle physical inactivity. So I hope that will make sense. We're going to move on to the first part. So Louis, you're going to take a bit of the lead on this bit. And in terms of when we go out to places and we talk to places across the whole of the country, and we national evaluation and learning partnership conceptual framework for the first time, how how would you introduce it? How would you explain it?
Essentially, um, taking the key principles that physical activity programs don't work in isolation for a population group means that we have to do things that are different within our approach, and this is what the Sport England funding for place work and having place work tailored to the place really emphasizes. So, to help us to identify the common features across the places, this conceptual model is a tool that can be really helpful to sort of bring across a standardized or a common framework that places doing unique work across the country can sort of bring things together that we can help understand and make sense of how this occurs or change is occurring. So the image on the screen is the conceptual framework that we've talked about. So the example of integrating physical activity across sectors at the top layer, that's something that's going to be been going on for a while as well. Strengthen community and individual capacities in the middle layer, and then on the bottom layer, tackling structural inequalities. What's key to say is just because integrating physical activity is on the top, tackling structural inequalities is on the bottom, isn't to suggest that one is better than the other. But the idea is just to try and visualize that there are three intersecting layers where they come together, where they need to work together in order to take a place-based approach to tackling physical activity inequalities.
Yeah, and just to come in on that quickly, a bit of a reflection from myself as well in terms of really trying to make this as clear as possible by the word conceptual, I suppose, which is there, it's written down. It's not necessarily going to change, but by conceptual, it's like these are the ideas that help us to understand what place-based working looks like, and what it involves. And for example, some of the things that we reflect on a lot is what place-based working is and what it isn't. And obviously, what it isn't is just sectors working together to come up with ideas to help places to be more physically active. Um, One of the things that we recognize is that one of the biggest factors that is impacting on inactivity is inequality, which is why we have tackling structural inequalities in there. So I think this model is quite useful in terms of the ideas it gives us to really sort of like break it down into those three layers so that when a place is really able to make progress around tackling physical inactivity, it does so in a way where the community are involved, the community are taking some sort of involvement, taking some sort of responsibility. Just before we move on to the next bit, the last thing I would say in relation to this is that um, we're not introducing all of these ideas and these layers on the basis that places are not doing any of this work and this is their first kind of, venture into this work. That there is very much an understanding and an interpretation on everyone's part that there's probably lots of good work that's going on in relation to this, that gives this a bit of a, which is why we call it a framework space for people to be able to reflect and build on. So that's so thank you for that, Louis. That's what we call the conceptual framework. And alongside this video, there'll be a series of links to lots of other videos and resources that bring to life the conceptual framework in more depth for those of you who are really interested in that. So we hope that that is a nice and introductory sort of flavour to what we're trying to do here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the conditions of change, which hopefully a number of you who are viewing this video will have would have already heard of, for example. So just to introduce these to you in terms of the conditions of change. The conditions of change are something, a series of ideas that have come out of a lot of the work that we've done over the last 5 years through the National Evaluation and Learning Partnership, with the places that we've worked with. So I'm talking about places as far as the northeast of the country, all the way down to the southwest. So, for example, the likes of Wivensea, all the way down to the likes of Exeter and Cranbrook. And one of the things that we've done is we've worked with the places to co-produce these conditions, and these conditions, in essence, have come from the places. So we've asked the places to be able to reflect upon what are some of the most important things that are necessary to be able to make progress to tackling these issues and these wicked issues that we have around structural inequalities. And essentially, we have co-produced with them a series of 9 conditions, which are here in front of you on the screen. So, for example, the first one is the processes for identifying barriers and enablers. That condition essentially is all about not presuming that we know what barriers and enablers are, actually trying to develop an understanding of what are the actual barriers and enablers that people have, and what processes do we have in place to be able to identify that. And these are, for examples, what we call the foundational conditions. So we also have the organizational policies. So that's, for example, is what are the policies and procedures that are in place across all layers of the system, for example, to be able to enable place-based working to actually happen effectively, removing things like red tape, ensuring that processes, policies and procedures are actually fit for purpose for community ownership and community participation, and not just those who work within strategic or organizations themselves. So we have lots of examples of these conditions in action across the country, which we would encourage you to look at. Lou, I hand over to you. Did you want to talk a little bit more about the other conditions as well that we have here?
Yeah, and one thing to really emphasize is these are the findings from the places across the country. So in terms of sharing the learning, sharing the findings, these are the key things that keep coming out. So for your place, what it looks like in Southampton might be different to Portsmouth to Havant, which is absolutely fine. But a key thing to stress is this is sort of trying to create one framework, one set of conditions that we can do across the country. So for Southampton, it might be focusing on a handful of conditions. For Havant, it might be on a different handful of conditions, and that's absolutely fine. So the one of the key conditions that I want to sort of focus in on is the cycles of learning and action, and the opportunity to go through that process of learning about the work as it's happening and making changes during the lifespan of the work. And that's something that that the places that have been able to make change as they go along have really emphasized, and the opportunity to do that across the three layers of the conceptual framework as well. So the integration of physical activity into sectors, strengthening community and individual capacities, tackling structural inequalities. Actually, that those cycles of learning and action will look different potentially in each of those different layers for different people. What works for the community to learn and make changes might be completely different to someone that works in the local authority. However, the process of going through that and that condition is a really important one.
I would just encourage those of you who are viewing this video to think about how do you what does good look like for you at the moment in relation to how you perceive these conditions without necessarily going into all of the detail and obviously the resources it will provide. And obviously there's a lot of rich detail that lies behind this for you to take a look at in terms of the description and what they mean and the examples. Is maybe just think about, well, where do we sit? Where do you sit in relation to this work? So, you know, collaboration, for example, how do you collaborate? So what does collaboration mean to you? How do you work with other organizations? But again, it's not just about sector integration at that top layer. For example, it's about how do you develop relationships with community organizations, voluntary sector groups, and be able to really reach into the granular, into that sort of like the granularity of the place in which you're representing and you're working with. What does that actually look like? How do we move away from silo orientated activities where people are competing for funding and which sometimes leads us to walk off into different directions, and obviously that's really important from a collaborative perspective to not be able to do that. Before I sort of like hand back to you again, Louis, the key thing that we're trying to say here is that these conditions of change are not things that we are throwing at places. It's not things that Sport England are throwing at places to say you must do this because we believe you're not doing it. One of the things that we find is that a lot of places that we start to work with are already doing these sorts of things, and it's about bringing them to life as well as sort of providing a space for reflection, hence cycles of learning and action, to start to think about, well, how do we move forward with these ideas in greater detail and what comes next. Brilliant. So that's probably a good time to wrap up the video. And just for those of you who are still listening, thank you. And we hope that the way that we've kind of structured this has been nice and introductory to you in terms of bringing to life the conceptual framework, why it's important, and obviously the conditions, what they are, why they're important on that kind of, real foundational level, which gives you a nice springboard to be able to move into, you know, your work around this exciting, you know, piece of work that's going on essentially. So any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us, and there will be a series of resources that we will provide with this video that you'll be able to tap into if you would like to. So thank you so much.